Hi everyone, welcome to Abuse on Men. This is a video this topic that I'm going to talk about in this video really changed my life completely. It's really, I don't know how I found this. I will tell you how, but it was a journey. But it really transformed my life. And it really connected all of the dots. So I was in an abusive relationship for 2 years. I've been out of it for the past 3 years. I've done a lot of work on myself to get out of it, to understand abuse, to build my confidence again. And I wanted to tell you about what happened to me in March of this year. So basically, I felt in the previous October, so exactly a year ago, I came back from holiday. It was 2 years after I left my abusive relationship, and I really felt like I was ready to put it all behind me. I cut my hair, I felt a bit more confident, started to feel a bit more myself, and over the next sort of 8 months, I felt great. Every day felt better and better. And I really felt happier than I've ever been. I felt like I'd really turned a complete corner and was on a very good upward curve. And I was so happy, really. And I really felt like everything that happened, I'd put behind me, learned from it, moved on. And I was, I don't know if the word cured, but I was out of it. I was out the other side. And then in March, my mum came to visit me, and over those 2 weeks that she stayed with me, I basically went from being the most confident and happy person to the most not confident, confused, and definitely not happy. And I felt like I'd gone back all the way to the beginning. And I couldn't work out why. And so after she left, and my mum is, by the way, an amazing person. She's a lovely person. She cares a lot for me. She loves me. She really is. And I have a lot of respect and love for my mum. But there was something about that visit that really threw me massively. So over the next month, I started to think about why. Why did I feel so bad about that visit? And I started to Google, or I started to understand that when my mum was here, we didn't really talk that much. We would go for dinners and we would kind of almost sit in silence. I would try and have conversations with my mum and they weren't really going anywhere. And my mum really didn't know how to communicate with me, I felt. And it really upset me. And then I started to think that, how would you say, like the relationship I thought I had with my mum might not be what it really was, I guess. Anyway, so I started to Google this topic I found this topic of emotionally immature parents, and I basically understood from it that parents can not give their children the emotional support that they need when they were growing up. And I was thinking about this, about my childhood, and my parents worked a lot. I remember when we come home from school, they would ask us how our day was, but we always felt most of the attention was with them having conversations between themselves about work and things like this. I remember at the age of 5, my mum was saying, we're all going on a family holiday, and I remember saying, I don't really care, because I don't see my dad anyway. So I always, I guess, felt that deep down my parents never really tried to understand me emotionally or support me emotionally. Financially, yes, they bought me everything I needed, everything I wanted. But when I had problems with things, I didn't go to them and they didn't try and help me, I guess, as much. Or we got into a pattern where it just didn't work, even if they tried. And basically I started reading these books, and there are these things called I read a book called Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. And I'll read through a couple of the notes I wrote, and basically it says we all play roles to gain attention and acceptance from our parents. The roles we play are not our true self, just what we have learned we will get acceptance. We can continue to play these roles later on in life. And then we create coping fantasies with our parents that when something happens, or if things were any different, or had something else, or we had something else, everything will be okay. Basically, the way I got attention from my parents was by working really hard. I would get the best results in school, and that was my thing. That was how I got attention, and the other thing was, or the other thing that's linked to this is, let me just go on. So it says there are two types of people. You have internalizers and externalizers. People who are internalizers keep things in. They're highly sensitive to others and become more independent as they solve things on their own. They often rescue or try to help others to get acceptance. Now, does that sound familiar to anyone? Because I know it sounded very familiar to me. I'm just going to read it again. Highly sensitive. They are very independent. They solve things on their own. And they often try and rescue or help others to get acceptance. Now, that is exactly what I do or did. I always try to help others. I've done it for as long as I can imagine. I'm also very independent. I always travelled. Very young. I even went to Hong Kong when I was 13. My parents sent me on my own to a client of theirs I never met, and I always played like, I don't know, I was just very independent. I remember even when I was a kid, my mum would tell me I had to make phone calls to my friends to make arrangements, and I would basically end up doing that with their parents almost. And that was almost from the age of, I think, 8, I was doing that. So those are the internalizers, and then the externalizers are people who react outwardly and make it known when they're unhappy. So internalizers keep it inside, externalizers vocalize it outside. So emotionally immature parents are unable to give their time or emotions to their children. They can't talk to their children about their child's feelings. They can focus only on themselves. They gloss over a child's problems. Children of emotionally immature parents want to connect to people more than anything. They can feel lonely when they don't get it. So this is, I mean, the book goes on and on, but this was basically how I felt, or how I feel at the time. And I really felt like I lacked connection with people. I still feel that a little bit. I'm going to read a bit from another book. Just bear with me a second. Before I get on to the real thing that really put everything together for me. So this was a book called Parent Yourself Again. And this says, as children, we do nothing but find ways to cope with the situation. In adult life, we find difficult to quit unhealthy relationships because we are so used to coping with them and have a bigger capacity to accept wrongdoings of others. So let me rephrase that. When we're growing up with emotionally immature parents, we basically develop coping mechanisms to what we don't get from our parents, to the love we don't get. And then when we encounter people later on in our life that mistreat us, we have a bigger capacity to accept their wrongdoings. Okay? So let's take it into an abusive situation when an abuser is horrible, says mean things, and says, that I'm the one, let's say, that's done everything wrong, and I don't know how to treat her right, and that she gets upset and mad and with me. The everything that you know from an abusive relationship. By having an emotionally immature parent, you are first of all trying to solve their problems all the time, because you feel that if you can get someone to love you, you will fix that relationship with your parents. So if you get your partner to love you, even though they say that you're the worst person in the world because this is what you've done to them, you will accept their wrongdoings, that they've done something wrong if they admit it later, which they usually do to bring you back. But also you try to help them because you feel if you can solve their problem, you can solve the problems that you have with your own family. It says here, we seek partners that are similar to our parents. If they don't give us love or are unavailable or reject us, then that's what we find in our partner. Right? So my parents, I don't feel that they gave me the real love and emotional support. And I felt rejected even at a young age from my family when they worked so much, they weren't available. And so I basically found a partner that would do the same, show love and then show distance. So now that I understood, I hope you're still with me, but now that I understood that my parents were emotionally unavailable, then I basically found this book called It Didn't Start With You by Mark Wallen. And it basically says how inherited family trauma shapes who we are and how to end the cycle. So the idea is that if you are a certain way, it may not be because of any trauma that you've had, but more because of a trauma that your ancestors had. Even if your parents don't know, it could be your grandparents that suffered it, or your great-grandparents. So this book basically says that any trauma that a great-grandparent, parent suffered, if they don't deal with that trauma, it will get inherited down, even if they're not aware of it, and that it all balances out. So, for example, someone that stole money at some point would then come down the chain to someone else later in the family who would feel that they don't deserve money and that they would lose all their money. Someone that murdered someone would then come down the chain, and then it would be someone who doesn't believe that they should exist, that they believe they're worthless and that they have no place on this earth. Now, these are very, extreme traumas, but I'm going to talk about my experience and what really helped me. So, I basically have this theme in my head that I've had since I was a child, and that is that no one loves me, no one cares about me, and I'm going to be alone for the rest of my life. And this is something that I've had in my head, in my back of my head, for as long as I can remember. And there is absolutely no reason why I should feel that way. Yes, I spoke already about, my parents not being so there for me and not giving me as much love as I probably should have, things like this. But this isn't trauma. This shouldn't have meant that I am thinking the way I'm thinking. The reality is that they were also raised in that way, and by their parents, and their parents were raised in that way by their parents. And at some point, the reason why that started was because someone had a trauma, which then created that distance and that sort of inability to communicate and to love and to do all of these things. So, let me explain. The book basically starts with this. It says, what is your biggest complaint in life? What would you complain about life most for? And with all of these questions, you have to write it down. You have to think about it and write it down. I have mine. I haven't got the notes up, but I would recommend you read the book. But these are the questions. The second question is, what do you blame your parents for? So what do you blame your mother for? And then what do you blame your father for? So it could be things like, my mother was never around, my father would always dismiss my ideas, my mother, never cooks for me, my father, never took me to football practice. Whatever it is, you just write it down. Then you look at both these things about your biggest complaint. So for me, it's like people don't connect with me well, things like this. It's hard to say it off my head because I really have to sit down and think about it. But then you look at answer these two questions, and then you basically get to your core sentence, which is, what is your biggest fear? Having looked at what you blame your parents for and what your biggest complaint in life is, what is your biggest fear? And my biggest fear is that no one loves me, no one cares about me, and that I'm going to be alone. And that is basically the core message. Now the next stage is answering, if that was actually true, what is the worst that would happen? And that gives you a little bit of clarity as to maybe, let's say, how, I don't know, for me it just made me feel more secure. Made me feel like, oh, I have this, it does sound bad, but it's not the end of the world. It wouldn't throw me, it wouldn't make me suicidal. It wouldn't, if the worst thing that would happen from that fear happened, it wouldn't be the end of the world for me. And that was interesting to look at. The next thing, the fifth thing, was to build a family tree. With the core message written at the top. You start with your great-grandparents, then your grandparents, then your parents. You can also have your uncles and aunts. But really it's the core immediate family. And you've got to go and ask your parents and everyone that's alive what traumas were in the family. And what I found when I did it. I've asked two different parts of the family. The book says that that people in the family, like the real traumas, are often hidden, and you have to really keep asking to really get to the bottom of it. Because maybe your parents don't know, but your grandparents know. Maybe your grandparents don't know, but your great aunt knows. So you got to keep asking and checking and sort of pursuing it, and eventually, hopefully you'll get the answers. You won't get maybe everyone in the family tree, but you'll get bits and pieces from people about different parts of it. And when I mapped it out, I basically found that my great-grandfather left. He was Russian. He left his family because he didn't want to be religious. So he basically got abandoned by his family, or he abandoned his family. At some point, I had family members that didn't talk to each other anymore, brothers that refused to talk to each other. They abandoned each other. I had twins that were born where one died, so they were abandoned by their twin. I had relationships where someone in the family left someone else, husband left a wife and was no longer a parent to their kids, and basically abandoned the whole family. And basically everywhere I looked on this family tree, I saw abandonment and people being alone. And then you come back to my, I feel emotional. When I come back to my core message, you can see that it says that no one loves you, no one cares about you, you're going to be alone. And I see that wasn't my trauma. That came from my ancestors. My great grandfather, my grandparents, my parents, they were the ones that suffered that trauma of people leaving them, abandoning them, losing people. And that's what they felt. They felt alone. They felt like no one loved them. They felt like they were going to be alone for the rest of their lives. And somehow, without communicating, but everyone started to not communicate in the right way, to not show the right love, to not show the attention. And basically, my parents weren't the way they were for any other reason than that was how they were treated by their parents. And they're not to blame for any of this, and they didn't know anything better, and they did the best they could. But my trauma, this message that goes around my head, has nothing to do with me. It's nothing to do with me. So the book basically then goes on to say, well, look, there's two ways to release the pain of this. Firstly, knowing it is enough. And by the way, I'll tie this all into abuse later on, but knowing is enough. So knowing that this message is nothing to do with me, this core message, my biggest fear is nothing to do with me, is enough for me to release it. For me, it wasn't so much the case, but then the book goes on to say that what you can do is you can write a letter to your ancestors. You can pick them out individually. You can say, look, I know that you suffered a lot. I know losing someone, being abandoned by someone, whatever it was, must have been incredibly painful and hurtful. It must have really harmed you. But it doesn't have to be my story. It's your story, and I don't have to inherit it. And I love you, and I wish you all the best, and I know that I don't need to carry this with me anymore. And then the third thing I did was self-talk, which I think is amazing, which basically is that I look in the mirror and I basically say, you know, people love me, people care about me. I'm going to. People love hanging out with me. I'm not alone. Basically saying all of the things that I want to be in the present tense, and your subconscious believes what you say, because it doesn't know what's fact or fiction. Even if you don't believe, your brain will. Basically, it will take it as fact, and then it will start to change that sort of automatic response. That when someone doesn't message you fast enough, that when someone decides that they don't want to, someone lets you down, you don't feel so abandoned, you don't feel so people don't love you, etc. For me. So now whenever anything happens which triggers that feeling, no one loves you, no one cares about you, you're going to be alone, I basically say these things in my head. It's nothing to do with me. It's not my trauma. It's my family's trauma, my ancestors' trauma. I say to myself that people love me. People do care about me. I'm not alone. And then bit by bit, I feel better and better every day. So I want to now talk a little bit about how it relates to my abuse. And this really ties everything together. So having felt in October last year that I was out of it and over it, and then up to March I was like on a different level. I was so happy, so relaxed. Then my mum came and I felt completely knocked to the bottom again. I basically was able to tie everything together with this, that the fear of abandonment, the fear that no one loved me, no one cared about me, meant, and this sort of love that I didn't really feel I got as a child growing up, meant that when I basically found my abuser, she basically gave me excess love. She was, it was, how would you say, love bombing. It was giving me her fullest attention, telling me how amazing I was, and basically wanting to be with me all the time and being there for everything. And it was excessive love that I craved because I didn't get it growing up. And and then when she switched a few months later, by the way, most normal people who had a normal level of love would, in that instant, same situation as me, be in that sort of recognize that excessive love is not real, and that is too much, and it's not okay, and they would have withdrawn. And because I didn't have that, and because I craved it so much, I really attached myself to it. When a normal person with a normal sort of experience of love would have said, oh, that's really weird, that's not normal, something's not quite right with this, and they wouldn't pursue that relationship. And then when she turned, and saying, things were my fault, and she was playing the victim, and she was being nasty and horrible to me, and threatening to break up with me, and telling me that I was such a bad person, then what happened was the two things. One was wanting to fix it, because if I can fix this and make her love me in the way that she did before, then I can fix my relationship with my family. That's one side. And the other side is that I had such a fear of abandonment that, oh no, the love of my life, this person who's been, giving me so much love, is going to leave me. And then you go back into that core theme, which was no one loves me, no one cares about me, I'm going to be alone. And that if she left me, then I would be alone. And that's what kept me in the relationship, that I didn't want to be abandoned, and I didn't want to live, I just felt that I would be alone the rest of my life. And that really played into her narrative of what she would be telling me all the time, that I would never find anyone as good as her, that I can't do anything on my own. You see how the whole thing just gels together perfectly and keeps me locked into that relationship. And so really this book gave me such clarity as to how I got into this relationship, why I got into this relationship, why I got stuck in the relationship, and also why I felt so bad when my mum came to visit me. And it really kind of connected all of the dots and made me have a better relationship with my mum, with my family, because I understand her pain, I understand her upbringing, I understand her life, I understand where she come from, I understand she did her best, also with my dad. Gave me a better understanding of what was lacking in me that made me go into this abusive relationship, which was really key to something that was haunting me from the very beginning, which was how will it change me, and will I get back into an abusive relationship? I read so much about people going from one abusive relationship to the next, to the next, to the next, and I refused to take that direction, and I had to solve it. I don't know if I have solved it. I haven't been in a relationship since then. But I feel very, very positive that I have and that I will be okay. And if I don't, then I will solve it again. I will work out what I'm missing. But right now, I feel very, very good about the triggers, about what's lacking. And by working on this core theme, this core message, I've really let everything go. Or starting to. I would say I'm not completely there. It's taking time. But I would say I'm a good 60 to 70% of my way. So I don't know how or why, you, if other people or yourselves got into abusive relationships. I don't know if this helps you. It certainly helped me, and I really hope that this might help others to really better understand themselves, their biggest fears in life, and hopefully to become the best person they can, to release themselves from the trauma. By the way, that's really important, to release yourself from the trauma. You cannot throw it under the carpet. You cannot ignore it, because any trauma that isn't dealt with by yourself will be carried down to future generations. Okay? The reason why I suffer about abandonment and love and all of this is because my ancestors most likely didn't deal with that trauma. They always had it at the back of their mind. They never really got over it. And that is what's so important, to release yourself from it for your kids, your grandkids, etc. So I hope this video helps, and it's quite an unusual, very deeply personal video. I guess they all are, but thank you, and I wish you all the best.